There are a lot of benefits to living under a rock, but keeping up with live musicals isn't one of them. I literally found out this weekend that Rent Live was happening before Hair Live and this coming Sunday. What's worse is that I'd only seen a third of the film years ago and was not familiar with the material. So instead of the month I gave Jesus Christ Superstar, I'll only be able to give Rent 3 videos in total. One for the 2008 Broadway production, one for the movie, and one for the live show itself. I don't mind only briefly talking about it though, since I kinda didn't really like it. Now, a disclaimer. You're not bad for liking Rent, and I don't begrudge you. I can see why it's fairly liked. Many of the songs are decent and catchy, and the emotional moments hit where it hurts. If that's what you're looking for in a musical, then Rent may be for you. But I'm looking for a lot more. For starters, I don't like Rent structurally. It has a habit of interrupting songs with other musical numbers that don't fit tonally. Going from No Day But Today with the life support group to a Carpe Diem Let's Bone sequence, started singing about how great it is being taboo to I have AIDS and we're in love. It's a lot of tonal whiplash without much transition, and we've long moved on when the first song finally finishes. It's like, oh yeah, we never got resolution on that. The opening song, Rent, while admittedly catchy, does a terrible job of introducing the show and its characters. Joanne and Collins are tied in, but really the song is about Mark, Roger, and Benny. They're the ones concerned with the year's rent that's suddenly due. Everyone else's part ends up being incidental and just as background noise, even if you've seen the show before. And boy are you punished for not knowing the show on your first viewing. Towards the end of Christmas Bells Are Ringing, the company are all singing different songs at once, and you as a Rent virgin don't know who you should be listening to. It ends up a jumbled mess and you feel like you're missing key events and details. On a second watch you realize nothing of importance is really going on, but that doesn't help new viewers, especially if you can't rewind in, say, a theater. Phantom of the Opera gets away with this in its prima donna sequence because you can easily hear the relevant parts, and the less quickly discernible are treats for future viewings that shift but not drastically alter your understanding of the show. At least in my experience, the same can't be said for Rent. When things take place is also hard to figure out without multiple viewings. I didn't realize until later that basically all of the first act is one day, or that a year had passed by the end of the show. There are little nods to the current date through the second act, but are few and easily missable on the first watch. I heard Lindsay Ellis state that Seasons of Love is supposed to represent a year having passed during intermission, and maybe I'm super dense, but after a few viewings I'm still certain intermission comes back with only a few days having gone by, just moving from Christmas to New Year's. Then there's the issue that the cast is so big and the show is so inept that we really don't know the characters. We don't get to hear what's Mark's problem with his parents, what Joanne the not-a-theater person found attractive in Maureen to begin with, how Benny and Mimi even ended up in the same circles. Simple things like these just go unexplained and unexplored. You're expected to go with it when Roger accuses Mark of hiding emotionlessly behind his camera, claims that he's looking for a community when it was never previously established. There is little learned about these characters except for bare basic facts, and anything else is told rather than shown and are only brought up because they're momentarily relevant. Each song ends, as does the exploration of ideas or thoughts raised in it, like Mark's whole dilemma in What You Own. The story just isn't interested. This especially becomes problematic when Angel dies and everyone talks about the great time she gave them and how deep their friendships with her were. It rings hollow. We didn't get to see most of it. When Mimi says that Angel was her closest friend, I'm left thinking, really? I couldn't tell. They spent scenes together, but they never seemed any more intimate than Roger and Joanne. I only know these characters well enough to feel for their struggles and suffering, and the show seems okay with that. But any empathetic person can be emotionally invested in folks facing hardships. That's a low bar to leap, and Rent just barely hops over. This is all just storytelling and technical issues. What's worse are the things the show is, and more importantly, isn't saying. For instance, when Mimi propositions Roger for sex and shooting heroin, she's painted as the one in the right. The show treats Roger rejecting her as him being afraid to live due to his baggage and openly frames staying away from your vices as wrong. Roger got AIDS from shooting up, and his girlfriend killed herself after finding out they were infected. But the show doesn't care. It doesn't care Mimi is trying to seduce him while omitting the fact that she's HIV positive. She doesn't even consider telling him before taking part in activities known to spread the virus. It doesn't care that Roger is trying to keep clean and use the time that he has left to achieve his last dream. No, it considers Mimi's reckless carpe diem approach to living to be superior to Roger's self-care. We know this because of the life support group. Mimi is not only parroting the group's motto, but they join in with "No Day But Today" as she tries to convince Roger to come over to her side. We sympathize with the life support group, and the leader of it is positioned as a wise voice of authority, so what they endorse must be just. True, Roger needs to stop being a shut-in and live while he's still got time to do so, but not through heroin and cautionless sex like Mimi is suggesting. But that nuance is lost on the show. Having the scene with life support whiplash into Out Tonight with no transition is meant to make you directly import the framing established by the life support meeting as the lens through which to view Mimi's song. She's living in the moment, while Roger is preoccupied with his condition so much that it's artistically paralyzing him. They say he's been tuning his guitar but not playing it for a year ever since he found out that he has HIV, painting him as a stifled failure, and his regard for consequences makes him an oppositional force to Mimi's life of affirmation and immediacy. Roger, meanwhile, makes none of the good arguments he has, like how heroin gave him and his girlfriend AIDS, how said girlfriend killed herself because of it. And the very first thing that he says to Mimi upon meeting her is how she reminds him of his lost love when she smiles, and the parallels are too painful to consider. Then he later admits total fault for the interaction and seeks to make amends with Mimi, the faultless avatar of the La Vie Boheme who was too good for this world. Without You is a lovely depiction of life after losing a loved one, but showing Collins caring for a dying angel in the background of Roger and Mimi singing about their relationship problems doesn't really work. It seems to be trying to put the troubles of Maureen and Joanne and Roger and Mimi on the same level as watching your lover slowly die of a horrific virus. Feeling pain over your conflict with your significant other is real and sometimes heartbreaking, but it's not the same as seeing someone dear to you slip away because life is just cruel. Yet the show conflates the two while giving the spotlight to Roger and Mimi since they're the ones singing. And the story wants you to extol the virtues of the bohemian lifestyle, yet doesn't make a case for it. Benny is shown to be the bad guy in joining the establishment, and since La Vie Boheme stands in contrast to what Benny represents, we're expected to just embrace it. Feel that the bohemians are inherently in the right because they're not like Benny or the system, but a case is never made as to why it's good. We're only shown why being a Benny is bad, while any positives of such a life isn't refuted. No alternatives given. We should just reject it and be a bohemian because it's not being part of the system. La Vie Boheme is catchy and fun, but it doesn't say anything. It lists things seen as taboo in a hashtag avalanche like "we didn't start the fire" and paints them as desirable traits, experiences, or ideas regardless of if they're legit harmful like eating disorders. A comparison would be someone who wants to be seen as emo embracing self-mutilation because it's an emo thing to do. Be counterculture because counterculture is cool. The phrase that keeps coming to mind is the one Lindsay Ellis used in her own video on Rent that incidentally was the order to the CDC addressing the AIDS crisis. Look pretty and do as little as possible. That honestly sums up this song and the show in general. Look attractive to those who feel outside of society, but don't seek to change the flawed world. The show is one big virtue signal. AIDS is pretty bad. It sucks being homeless and poor. Not conforming to gender norms or being heterosexual is cool. Hating your parents is a thing. Isn't gentrification a bummer? A lot of important topics that deserve and need to be discussed are brought up but never explored. They're simply set dressing when not being downright harmful. Of course the bi character is kissing everyone and cheating left and right. There's an argument to be made about any representation of marginalized groups being good, but for a show that aims to humanize those society would rather not treat as people, this is pretty atrocious. The homeless characters are just there. The tent city is forgotten after Maureen's show, and nothing comes of Mark being called out for using someone else's strife to make his art, and then failing to put up when directly asked for help in a way that cost him something, even though it was just a single dollar. The life support group comes and goes. The only display of the horrors of AIDS is Angel's tragic death, but we don't even get to see the decline in health, or the days leading up except for a quick glimpse in the background of another song. Hell, the whole conflict with Benny is quickly dropped after intermission. For a show about the pain of the downtrodden, it has little time and few words to say on the matter. We spend more time with the people who could at any moment choose to not be poor and struggling. Roger, Mark, and Maureen have parents who they can return to. They don't need to be fighting for their next meal in Alphabet City, but they choose to because la vie boheme. Mimi is a troubled girl who needs saving by one of the main characters, so some focus is put on her. And those without a hope to escape, Collins and Angel, they're left to the side. We don't see how they are getting by. We don't even see how AIDS is affecting the characters who have it, except for Angel dying, and sometimes pausing to briefly take AZT, which they shouldn't even be able to afford if they're really living dollar to dollar. This is a story that wants to do everything and fails because it's trying to do everything. It frames itself as being in the face of every pearl clutcher and Benny out there, but ultimately doesn't challenge their values, or they're allowing many people to suffer, be it from AIDS, homelessness, or society rejecting them. Instead, it suggests letting the world burn and do what makes you feel good. No need to challenge the system that puts you down. It'll suffice to live adjacent to it. The show acts like every rebellious buzzword you can imagine, yet it doesn't seek to rebel. Again, look pretty and do as little as possible is the phrase that rings in my ear as I watch even the Broadway performance. There are aspects I enjoy in the show, like Joanne and Mark bonding over Maureen giving them the runaround, and how crafty Mimi is in Light My Candle, and some of the songs are going on my musical rotation. Joanne and Maureen's relationship is portrayed as being fully equivalent to a straight one. Angel is not only lovable with a beautiful voice, but also a good person that immediately shares her windfall with utter strangers on the basis of how close they are to her boyfriend, whom she trusts. She always has a kind word and tries to diffuse any conflict, and she's loved in return so much that Benny of all people pays for her funeral arrangements out of pocket when the priest wants nothing to do with it all. But every time I consider Rent, I'll always be reminded of how little it cares about the causes it claims to be highlighting. It's doing what the homeless lady accuses Mark of, profiting off the suffering of others without trying to make their lives better. That was one hell of a script to record, I'll tell you. I'm not used to talking, so longer scripts like that really hurts my voice, but at least I got it done. I feel like bringing my cat in for this one. If you like this video and you want to actually keep up with the content that I make in the future, YouTube is not the place to do it. Instead, follow this Discord invite link. There you'll be able to access my content stream, you'll be able to talk to me in my NotAVampyre crypt when I'm awake and online. You can also find me on Twitter at NotAVampyre. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and until next time. Thank you, cat. Your claws really hurt though. This sure is too thin for this.